Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais with another episode of the Yakking Show, where we bring you latest news on health. We do that with bringing experts onto the show. But first, let's introduce co-host Kathleen Beauvais. Hi, Kathleen. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Peter, and thank you all so very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate having you. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today. We are so privileged to welcome Sarah Dawkins to the show. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Peter. It's a great honor to be with you.
Well, today we're talking about healing yourself, aren't we? So, just to give all of you a little bit of a background on Sarah, she's a holistic health coach, author of the book Heal Yourself, podcaster, and a former registered nurse. But as I said, today she's here to yak with us about how we all have the ability to heal ourselves despite what conventional medicine says. So let's just dig right in. Sarah, you have a firm belief that everyone has a capability of healing themselves, even from chronic or even serious illness. Why do you believe this?
Because I've healed myself of several problems. I've healed psoriasis, eczema, acid reflux,
Mm.
candida, chronic joint pains, severe debilitating headache for 6 weeks, um, underactive thyroid, burned out adrenal glands, and depression with suicidal thoughts.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Wow. And
Wow.
and so you did this, just to give us a little bit of background. How did you go about doing all of this? I mean, it seems like a huge undertaking.
Isn't it just? My mum was a nurse, so I was raised in the medical model, believing that when you get sick, you go to the doctors, you take a
Sure.
pill,
Hmm.
and you have a diagnosis, and the pills make you better. And that was my belief for 41 years
Right.
until somebody questioned me, one of my nurse colleagues, about taking pharmaceuticals at home. I'm like, but that's what we do. That's how we heal. That was my view of the world, that healing required medicine and doctors and potentially hospitals. So me being me, went away and looked at, well, why would she say that? What caused her to say that? So I started looking at pharmaceuticals, healing, the body, the mind, and just went into a lot of research every night after work. Just research, research, research. The more I read, the more it blew my mind, because I'm finding people that have healed themselves, and I'm starting to see what they did to heal themselves, and I'm starting also to see the mind body relationship.
Mhm.
And so I started tweaking my diet and lifestyle.
Mm.
Initially, just cut out wheat and dairy because they cause inflammation. Tried to de-stress a bit because a lot of my health problems were caused by stress, and went out walking and got the sun on my skin. But because I was still learning, I've gone from here's what I can see to now here's what I can see, but there was still all of this unseen. I was only looking in the physical plane, if you like. I was
Hmm.
looking at nutrition, exercise, sleep, hydration, breathing, just all the physical things. So I was only looking at changing in that physical plane. However, I healed the acid reflux, the psoriasis, and the eczema within about a month,
Wow.
just by the cutting out the wheat and dairy, walking a bit more, and getting the sun on my skin. And so that now showed me that actually I didn't need the medications that I'd been taking to treat these health problems that I'd had, sort
Mhm.
of on and off the whole of my life. And now my body is reacting by healing itself. So I'm thinking, wow, this is really amazing. What else can I do? So then I started looking at for the chronic pain that I had in my joints, back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, and the candida. But it wasn't until 2010 I spiraled into a dark depression. My thyroid stopped working. I burned out my adrenal glands. I dropped my blood pressure, and I started having suicidal thoughts. And at that time, because I was in that awful state, I couldn't think logically and rationally. So didn't do the research to find out what I needed to do, and I didn't understand what was going on in my body, and I didn't have the ability to start thinking, well, what can I do and how can I heal it? But I had a friend, a really good friend, who came and took me to the gym once a week. We did 2 exercise classes back to back. She laughed at me because Wednesday was the only day I drank water because we went to the gym. But I also had dogs, so I had to take the dogs out for a walk twice a day. So I was out walking, but head down, didn't want to speak to anybody, didn't want to interact with anybody. And at the gym, I just kept my head down and did whatever the instructor told us to do. So I believe that the being outside with the dogs and the exercise over a period of time started to really help me to lift my mood, but I didn't see it. And it was only when I started really healing and being sort of coming back online, if you like, and being able to start thinking logically and rationally, I started looking and like, well, I see I was practicing mindfulness and gratitude, but I didn't know that's what I was doing, just like intuitively.
Right.
And in doing so, with the exercise of being outside, that really helped me to lift my mood. And then I was able to go on and heal my thyroid and the depression. My adrenal glands took a lot longer to heal because they're really slow healers. Takes a lot of work, but it's doable. And when I'd done all of that, I'm like, I need to tell the world, this is because for me, it was mind blowing because my whole life had been brought up with, you need a doctor, you need a pill and a diagnosis. And now here I am, not going to the doctors, not taking pills and not looking at diagnosis, just looking at the symptoms and what the symptoms are saying because they're messages.
Right.
Yeah, wow. Sarah, we want to get into doctors and pills a little more further down the track. But if someone comes to you for advice, what's the first step? Do you tell them to look at the physical side, as you said, the physical plane, or do you get them to start on the spiritual, emotional? What's the first step now that you've had all this experience?
My sessions are done just in informal conversation. I ask them to tell me about their life. So as they're talking, like red flags go off in my mind when certain points are hit and mentioned, and I'll take them back to those points. So it depends what they're needing. So if I've got clients who are looking to lose weight, I'm looking at where the weight started piling on, what was going on in their life. More often than not, there's an emotion that caused the weight gain. If I'm looking at mental health problems, again, it's what started, what preempted the mental health problems, what was going on in their lives before the mental health problems started. So it depends. Everybody's unique and individual, but there's a lot of emotional problems underpinning a lot of health problems. And that can be just, I'm going to say simple stress, but it's not really simple, is it? When we look at it. Or it can be some trauma from their childhood. And that doesn't have to be like physical or sexual trauma. It could be something like somebody was held back from doing something so that somebody else could cut in a line or go in front. It could be somebody was teased throughout their childhood. What's more important is not so much what really happened. It's more about how that person's holding it, because we're holding it through the eyes of the child we were at that time. Even though we're adults now, we're still holding that trauma as that child and seeing it through the eyes of that child. So it's about understanding that with the knowledge and skills we've got now as an adult to understand our inner child and what it's trying to say through the symptoms that we're feeling.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm a firm believer that there is a root cause to illness.
Totally. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. There's got to be a root cause. But oftentimes doctors will say, well, you might ask, well, doctor, why did I get this cancer? Well, we don't know. These things happened. They seem to happen in a vacuum. And they say that because they really don't know the root cause. And I know that there's a root cause, but how can somebody go about figuring that out for themselves? Because oftentimes, they've become sick. We're trying to tell them there's a root cause here to figure it out. But how do they go about doing that exactly?
So finding the root cause is about exploring the symptoms. So I'm not an advocate for disease diagnosis, because it helps some people to say, oh, well, see, I really am sick. The doctor's validated it. Here's a diagnosis. But actually, if we look at the symptoms that we've got, it's our body expressing whatever's going on for us to help us to find the root cause. So what are the symptoms? If you were to write down what your symptoms are, and then write down how they're expressing what you're feeling, and then what your symptoms are stopping you doing, and if you can, how your symptoms are benefiting you, because sometimes there's a benefit in our life. If we've got this symptom, maybe we can't go to that party, or we can't go out and meet those friends, or we're too tired to cook a meal. So sometimes there's a benefit to our symptoms, and it can bring a whole host of support and people to help us with these symptoms, to help look after us. And that can be the love that we're craving, or the attention that we're craving, that we maybe missed out on as children. So in looking at the symptoms, what are the symptoms saying? How are you describing them? What words are you using to describe them? Become curious. What is it stopping you from doing? What would you really like to do if you were symptom free? And what's that stopping you? But look at the words you're using and get curious, because the answers are in the symptoms.
But, and there's always a but, there are some causes of illness or conditions that are totally without one's control. As I lived in Africa most of my life, and I got malaria. Now, malaria is not a very nice disease to have, or a nice condition. It's a parasitic thing, and it kills a lot of people. I don't believe I may have been able to alleviate the worst of the symptoms with the right mindset. I don't believe I would have necessarily. I could have survived the malaria, I hope, without medication, but I think I recovered a lot quicker by taking medication.
Yeah.
So my view is there are some things that are exceptions. Snake bite or allergy to wasps would be another one. Bees would be another one. I agree with what you're saying on most things, but there are always these outliers that I think
I
require
think we're
some
talking,
intervention.
Peter, I think in this case, I think we're talking mostly about chronic illnesses.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a place.
You get a virus you've caught a virus, but it's not like you have a chronic, long-lasting condition. I think it's different. I think we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, and there is a place for Western medicine in accident and traumas, and obviously malaria and trauma. My dad had sepsis and pneumonia, and he wouldn't be alive without Western medicine. So it absolutely has a place. But for the most chronic of health problems and the symptoms, migraines and irritable bowel and these syndromes, the medical model don't understand those.
No, I agree. Let me go back a step and argue with Kathleen for a moment, and you, but not quite as severely. I think you're absolutely right, but I think what you're saying. No, I will always argue if I think it's necessary. I think what you're saying has a bearing on things like malaria, because some people almost die with malaria because they are scared of it and because they won't allow their body's own defenses to fight it, right? They say, oh, I've got this terrible disease, I'm going to die. Other people get through it relatively easily. And the same applies to a lot of other conditions as well, whether it's external or internal. So I think everything you're saying has a big bearing on those conditions. Like if you have the right mindset, if you have the right diet, if you have the right attitude, if you exercise, you're going to get through these bad ones a lot better, even if you've got to take pills than if you don't. So that's the point I was trying to make. Kathleen, I was arguing in a nice way anyway. Okay, so I've got another one for you, Sarah, and that is this mindset, and you've alluded to it already, in the Western world, that if you're at all sick, you've got to go to the doctor and you've got to have a pill, and preferably an antibiotic. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, I've got a cold, I've got to go and get an antibiotic. Not going to do them the slightest bit of good, but it's they just believe it, right? That it will help and they get better. And all they're doing is increasing the resistance to antibiotics and affecting the environment and everything else. So, how do you change that mindset? And why is that mindset so prevalent?
I think a lot of it's conditioning,
Mhm.
because we've been taught to see doctors as
Yeah,
gods.
Yes.
And slowly they're coming down off their pedestals, lowering
they
slowly,
are.
slowly. But I think because we see them as gods, or we've been conditioned to see them as gods, we believe everything they say. And the experiments in, there was it the 50s and 60s, Ash's experiment to obedience to authority.
Yes,
When somebody wears the white coat and has a clipboard, we deem them to be authoritarian, and we will do what they tell us, even if it goes against what we think. So our conditioning is obedience to authority, and doctors are seen as authority. So if the doctor says, I'm going to give you this antibiotic, and maybe the doctor's thinking, well, that'll just, help that person to believe in medicine, or maybe help them to think that they can get better through it, rather than understanding it's just a virus, it will run its course. So that conditioning to want that tablet. And I go back to what I said earlier, most people just have some symptoms, go to a doctor, expect a pill, take a pill, and think that they've healed, when all that they've done really is suppress those
rest the symptoms.
symptoms,
That's right.
not
That's right.
heal.
Yeah.
And to truly heal, it's about understanding that root cause and addressing it. And that's not to say we're permanently healed, because if we step back into those old patterns and old ways of thinking during times of stress or upset, those symptoms will come back to remind us that we're not living our life in alignment, that we've
Right.
stepped out, and we need
Right.
to readdress it.
Right.
I've just got to, before Kathleen ask you something else, I've just got to throw in that those pedestals that those doctors are standing on have become seriously eroded since 2020, I believe,
Yeah.
since this whole COVID farce and debacle. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's we see in the people we talk to,
Mhm.
not only on the show, but just in general life, a huge change in attitude, and many, many people waking up and saying, we've got to ask questions now. Thank you. Back to you,
Absolutely.
Kathleen.
Yes. So Sarah, when we talk about this notion of a holistic approach to healing, a lot of people just don't understand what that means. Can you tell us what it means for you? What does it involve? What does holistic healing involve exactly?
So holistic is about everything together.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, if you look at doctors, they've all specialized. So you've got a cardiologist and a pulmonologist and an oncologist and a dermatologist, and they're just looking at one thing, one part of the body.
Yeah, so one
But
thing
our
I don't
body,
understand, you're absolutely
yeah,
right.
our body
They have
isn't one
specialties.
part.
Like, do you think your heart and your lungs are two separate? Like, really? Do you think that you're one body?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
never understood this. Yeah,
So
agree.
holistic means the whole of us. So
Mhm.
we have to look at everything's impact on everything else. Like the thyroid, for example. When the thyroid is having trouble, it's never the thyroid. There's been many symptoms before the thyroid shows up. It's the thyroid's the end of the line, so there's a lot we can do before we get to there. But so holistic is about healing everything together. It's also about the mind, body, spirit. So from what I've learned through my own healing and through writing my book, Heal Yourself, and reading the 74 other people that's healed MS, autoimmune, ALS, or motor neurone, as we call it in the UK, cancer, Lyme, and so much more.
Mhm.
What I've learned is that most of us address the physical. That's the easy one, if you like. That's the one that we think of when we're thinking of healing.
Mhm.
Then there's the mental health. And I didn't realize that until I was way into my healing with the mental health. And that involves calming the mind down with the use of gratitude and mindfulness and meditation. You can, if you can't sit quietly, which I couldn't because that voice was just forever in my mind, you can do some guided meditations. There's plenty on the internet for as little or as long as you want. It's about calming the mind. But we also need to stimulate our mind for good health, to keep it in good shape. We can do that through reading, through learning a language, doing a crossword, becoming creative, artistic, expressing ourselves, journaling. There's so much that we can do to help our mind. Then there was the spiritual, which is about coming back into that little voice inside of us. It's not necessarily about religion, because not everybody's religious, but it can be. But there's a voice inside all of us that's not our ego. Our ego tends to shout. This voice is quieter. It's about becoming aware of it and coming back into ourselves and listening for that voice and speaking to it, asking ourselves questions, because that little voice inside of us, call it your inner wisdom or your higher self or whatever you want to call it, but we need to come back and talk to it.
Right.
And the part that I really found that didn't know that I didn't know when I did my coaching was the emotional side.
Mhm.
And that is huge. That is I think the biggest part of healing. It's about acknowledging what went on in our past and addressing it, forgiving it and letting it go. Because we're holding on to that, those memories, that trauma, that lack of forgiveness, whatever we've got going on, we're holding it tight as that child that we were. And whilst the memories might even fade, or we might even not remember, we can still have the emotional responses when something triggers us and reminds us, even though we don't have the memory, something will be triggered in our subconscious mind of that memory. And we will have an emotional outburst, an overly emotional outburst. So it's about understanding what happened in our past and looking at it through the eyes of the adult we are now, with the skills and knowledge that we've got, and supporting that inner child and healing that inner child. And that is the biggest part of the work I do with clients, to help them to heal that inner child that's still holding that grief and trauma or anger and hatred within inside them. So there's the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, the four pillars of health as I've devised. They all need addressing for healing to be holistic.
Right.
And as I said previously, healing is about understanding the root cause and healing that. We might not have cured whatever, because if we step back into those old patterns, the symptoms will come back. So you could say we haven't healed it, we haven't cured it, because it's come back, because it's a reminder that we're stepping into those old patterns again. So our body's going, hey, look, you're doing that again. You need to stop that.
Right.
So healing is mind, body, soul, all of our now, all of our past.
Mm-hmm. Tell us some of the success stories you've had, obviously without giving away any confidential stuff, but give us a few examples.
So I had a lady come to me recently in floods of tears, and she didn't understand what was going on, other than she was totally emotional all the time, and felt that she was a burden to her family. And when I explored her life with her, she'd had a lot go on in her childhood, and her mum, it seemed, suffered from mental health problems. And she thinks she might have gone into an institution for some time, and she was given to an aunt. So she saw that, she felt that she wasn't wanted, and she was given to an aunt to be looked after during what she thought was maybe her mum's hospitalization. So in learning to see her childhood differently, that she wasn't abandoned, her mum gave her away out of an act of love, so that she was cared for within the family still. So it was helping her to see that she hadn't been abandoned. And that then helped her relationships going forward, because if we've got an abandonment wound, we can be very needy in relationships, because we don't want to be abandoned again as an adult, because we're holding what we felt as a child. So I helped her with that. I've worked with a lady regarding her weight, massively overweight, looking at the root cause of the weight gain. And when we gain weight, and I can talk from experience, I've lost 42 pounds through just over 3 stone. Wow. I was much bigger in my younger years. And weight we put on the weight, it's either like a learned familial, we learn the habits of the family because the family have got poor eating habits, or we put the weight on to protect ourselves, to provide a safe space, to keep people further away from us. That's the emotional side of it.
Right.
So it's helped her to understand why she'd put on the weight and how she was eating and the foods she was choosing, and how she would, look to eat emotionally. And really, there was no hunger there. It was just, there was an emotion. She didn't want to feel it. So the food would help stuff that emotion back down.
So I got to jump in there. You say some people either consciously or unconsciously put on weight as a barrier to keep people away.
That's the
right?
Emotional side of weight gain. That's
Emotional
one of the
one
sides.
yeah. Interesting. And do those same people then complain, I'm having difficulty in having a relationship?
They can struggle with relationships. And when I've mentioned that to a couple of people recently, they're like, oh, and then they've seen that actually they can see some truth in that. But, until I've put it to them, they'd never even considered that was a part of it.
No,
but there was a lot of emotion underneath it. So it was like self-preservation.
So here's one I've got to ask you. You're a lot younger than I am. My observation is that my generation, and probably people 10 years younger than me, were brought up somewhat tougher than subsequent generations, particularly the youngsters nowadays. And we were told to like it or lump it, that's life, get on with it. Get on with it, deal with it, get on with it. And most of us did. Some didn't, but most of us did. And I could tell you stories from my part, not abuse from parents, not at all, but the freedom that I was allowed as a 12-year-old to ride 40 miles on my horse, for instance, unaccompanied, to go and shoot rabbits at 12 with a shotgun, all that sort of thing, I believe led me to grow into a more balanced and resilient adult. And I think we're doing a huge misservice to youngsters nowadays by protecting them from, yes, there's risk in everything, but we're protecting, not we, society in general in the West is protecting young people and children from so much that they need to be exposed to learn how to deal with life. Am I on the right track there, or am I just being an old guy thinking things were always better in the old days?
No, I totally agree with you. I was raised very similar, and that I didn't quite have that freedom that you had, but I was more children should be seen and not heard kind of a growing up.
Yeah.
But no, when I remember we could play out almost dawn till dusk, not so much in the summer because dusk was a lot later, but we could go out on the streets and just be. There was no phones. There was no way to contact us. And we had that freedom. But within that freedom as well, we built relationships. We understood how to be with people. Whereas I think children today are so insulated because of technology. They haven't got the social skills that we learned because they're interacting on a phone with emojis, and emojis don't really portray the emotions. And body language is 93% of the message, isn't it? The spoken words only 7%. So I think they're missing out on a lot of relationship building and a lot of life skills as well, because when we were out, we learned to do things. Some peers taught us, or we just found ways to solve puzzles ourselves, find the solutions. And I think children are really missing out on that now. And I think the other side of it as well is that a lot of children are being kept in like ultra clean environments, whereas we would just like go out and get dirty and don't wash and
Right.
Back to you, Kathleen. We're running out of time here.
Yes. Would you say though, Sarah, that healing the body is 90% mindset?
I don't know if it's quite 90%. It's certainly a lot because, like my history, I believed in medicine. That's how I was raised. So I had to change my mindset to believe that I could heal. And I didn't truly believe until I started to heal and I saw the healing in my own body. So there's definitely a large percentage of healing is the mindset. And you only have to look to the placebo effect to see that.
Absolutely.
And I think it's about 30%, 33% that heal with the placebo effect. So I wouldn't like to put a percentage on it, but it's definitely a huge part of the healing process. But you've got to understand what your symptoms are trying to tell you to know what to deal with. So as well as having the belief, you've got to understand the root cause of your health problems. Believe that you can heal and address them.
I've known some people who've been diagnosed. I know some people that have been diagnosed with, say, stage 4 cancer, and they've been told there's no cure. And I think that is so sad, because as soon as you believe you can't be cured, you won't be.
Slippery slope.
Right? So even though the conventional medicine says that, they can't give you the magic pill to cure you of this illness, that means you can't do anything for yourself to help cure this. And it just makes me so angry, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's medical hexing. The doctor's literally hexing that person.
That's right. I know.
I
Terrible.
believe that. Yeah.
So, Sarah, I've got one for you that we ask all our expert guests. There's a lot of negativity and doom and gloom in the world. Now, just before we came on the show, we saw that both Kathleen and I saw news that Iran is sending 100 rockets or missiles into Israel. People are really concerned about all sorts of things. We are not pessimistic, right? What's one tip you could give our audience that's listening and watching today that they could start doing today to give them a better outlook on life and a better chance of living a long, healthy, and contented life? What's the first thing, in your opinion, they should start doing?
I think we have to rein it in and look at what we're responsible for and what we can control.
Yeah.
Because there's only ourselves. We're only responsible and can control ourselves. We can't control people and situations. And you can see all that negative news. And what can we do? Well, we could send a donation. Potentially, we could go out and help. But we can't control that. No. We can only control ourselves. So do whatever you feel you can, but in the knowledge that you have no control over what's going on externally. So understand that you are only responsible for and can only control yourself, and try to let go of wanting to control the external, because we just can't.
Right.
You're absolutely right. Good answer. That's something we try and live by as well. Sarah, from my side, thank you. That's really good. We're all singing from, despite my argument about malaria, we're all singing from the same hymn book here today. Believe me.
I think we are. Yeah.
Oh yes. I just like winding Kathleen up, and she
yeah, I know you do.
knows me. But I've got to compliment her. She's led me much further down the path of holistic life and eating better and herbal medicine than I ever was on before. So she's done me a lot of good. But thank you for being here. Thank you, our audience, for watching and listening. And to the audience, as you can see, we have another brilliant guest today, and with a nice British accent and coming from Spain, which I'm really jealous about. So to make sure you don't miss out on our guests coming up, and we've got a lot of really interesting guests coming, hop onto our website, theyakkingshow.com, and sign up for our newsletter. We'll just send you one email a week, tell you who's on this week and who's coming next week. Thank you again. That's it from me. Thanks, Sarah. Back to Kathleen.
Sarah, before we let you go, you have to tell us a little bit about your book and how people can contact you.
Thank you. My book came out of my own healing because I wanted to tell the world that they could heal themselves, because it was mind-blowing to me. So I reached out on social media. 74 people came back sharing their stories, healing cancer, multiple sclerosis, ALS, Lyme, autoimmune, stroke, allergies, eczema, psoriasis, so many different health problems. And they all wrote their own stories. So all the healers have got their own chapters, sharing their own journey. They're just everyday regular people. And it's available on Amazon worldwide. And in America, it's also available in Barnes & Noble.
Fantastic. And now how do people contact you?
Thank you. If you go to my website, www.sarahdawkins.com, that's SARAHDAWKINS.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's been very enlightening. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you also very much for tuning into our show. And I can see Peter is giving me a
Waving,
finger.
I'm waving a finger. My hearing is awful, and maybe because I'm old, my attention span is diminished like that of a goldfish. I didn't catch the name of the book. Can you give it us again for the audience?
Thank you. It's called Heal Yourself.
Heal Yourself. I got it this time. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Peter.
Great.
Well, thank you all so very much for tuning in. If anyone is interested in being a guest on our show, we welcome you to visit us at theyakkingshow.com. All you need to do is click on the contacts tab where you will find a short application form, and we would love to hear from you. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.